Well, you can sit wherever you want.
I've actually got stars. That's how I roll.
Good evening, everyone. Woo!
Yeah.
Welcome to another London at Muffins. Thank you so much to Kandji for organising this one tonight, all the food and drink downstairs. I think they've, upstairs, yeah, downstairs. They've raised the bar with food, I reckon. So thank you so much. Give them a quick round of applause. That's what the schedule looks like for tonight. So we are actually at 10 past, and we'll come back to this. We've got something special coming up at 5 past 8 as well. Zoom call coming in from the US. Let's talk about the Mike Adams Foundation, and 2 other talks coming from our guests. James Penning from dataJAR and myself. But we'll start with Kandji. So, would you like to join us, please? Very much. That work. Hey. Okay, goes forward, it doesn't go back. Does it go back? Yeah, there we go. Okay, go back. Hello, everybody. Okay. Hello. That was rubbish. Hello, everybody. Yay. All right, so we're going to talk about MDM while you sleep. The reason we've chosen this topic is kind of the aim of our product is to take things that can be particularly complex and make it elegant and as simple as possible. This kind of extends that thought process by taking things that can be particularly complex, making them simple, and automating. So we're going one stage further with this. We've got a very brief agenda. This clicker is going to go forwards. It rhymes in the way. I think it rhymes in the way of it. I'm just going to go, there we go, right. Very quick agenda, a quick welcome slide, we're going to do some introductions, and then we're going to talk about Okta workflows and MDM. Has anybody heard of Okta workflows before? Yeah. Excellent, a few people in the room. Anybody an expert in Okta workflows? No. Okay, good, you might learn something. So the point of this, we're going to talk about Okta workflows and MDM using Okta as an IDP and Kandji as an MDM. You don't necessarily need to be using Okta as an IDP or Kandji as an MDM to utilise the stuff we're going to talk about, but we kind of think you should, so that's why we're going to demo. We're also going to talk about a bit of a Kandji update, some stuff that's coming going forward, and I've got a bit of a disclaimer for that later because we will be talking a little bit roadmap stuff. But yeah, I'll get to that point when we get to it. But you're going to be let inside what we're doing over the next few weeks and months a little bit. We haven't actually done this before, so this is a little bit of a test to see how much I get in trouble with my US colleagues on the stream. So, backwards, lovely. So, very good welcome to Kandji's offices. We obviously don't occupy the whole of this building. That is the plan for FY 2025, Rich. Something like that. Yeah, cool. 24. Seeing some familiar faces here, people we've seen before, some people we haven't. So, the networking afterwards, please feel free to come talk to us. We'd absolutely love to meet you if we haven't before and love to catch up if we have. Straight on to who we are. So, for those of you who haven't met me, I'm James Dancer. I'm Head of Customer Support for Kandji EMEA. To my right is Ryan Slater, Senior Solutions Architect for Kandji EMEA. And to my left, Andy Rana, Solutions Engineer for Kandji EMEA. We also have in the room, you've probably seen a few people with these t-shirts with bees on. I want to use the pun bee shirts, but that just sounds really lame, but I'm going to go with it. Ryan forgot his. So he went to Charles to Wit earlier and bought that polo shirt. Congratulations, Ryan.
Thank you.
So anybody you see wearing one of these today works for Kandji, please feel free to ask them anything you like. If you need something, please feel free to ask them. We are here for you for the evening. Also in the room, right at the back there, is Rich Amy, who is our General Manager for EMEA. You've waved to everybody, you've all seen him, right? Excellent, now everybody knows who has the company credit card. I'll pay for that later. In fact, no, you're going to pay for that later. So, into what we're going to talk about. Ryan, please get out of the way. They're gonna do it. There we go, right. Fantastic. Yeah, layer 8 problem. Octa workflows and MDM. So, what's it all about? This is basically, Octa workflows are an enterprise version of like an if this then that style workflow. So we look at when this happens, when this thing happens, if this is the case, do this and then do that. Pretty straightforward, right? The point is it can leverage some quite complex technology where you might normally be writing scripts, you might normally be writing functions, but you can do it in a nice sort of GUI graphical-based environment. So why would you want to use this? Everything is based on events. Events can be either triggered by a specific action, and bear in mind this can be Octa as an IDP, it can be a custom API, it can be a number of different things that will trigger a specific action that we'll go through in a bit, or you can schedule it, which is quite cool, because it means you can literally do MDM while you sleep. That's the title of the presentation. It all makes sense now, right? It's a low and no-code solution, so while largely it's a no-code solution, you can do things like if you're using a custom API, if you know the JSON schema for the API you're using, then you might have to write a bit of JSON. Not the end of the world. I'm guessing most people in here aren't afraid of JSON. No, a little bit, okay. If you don't know how to write JSON, it's GUI driven, and you have connectors and cards. The whole point of this is that you can think of cards like a function in a script, so it's a repeatable process that you can feed information into and get an action out of. If, for whatever reason, you aren't using one of the applications that's on the right, which is an integrated application that already exists with Octa workflows, as you can see there's the B logo, that's Kandji. Going backwards again, lovely. This is, okay.
You should automate that.
Absolutely automate that. Yeah, if the application you're using isn't on the right, you can use any publicly available API endpoint. It has to be publicly available, and you have to be able to authenticate against it. Provided you know the schema, you can use it. Why would you want to use a workflow as opposed to just writing a script? Well, as we all know in this room, the IT landscape is changing. There's more full stack roles emerging where you're expected to do more things than you may have been expected to do in the past. And a lot of the time, as I think we all know, you may not necessarily have the knowledge to do everything that is asked of you immediately. This is kind of a nice way to be able to get there without having to learn a load of complex technology to be able to accomplish the same goal. There's also no development knowledge required. As I said, you can get into things like JSON, etc., but you don't necessarily need to know JSON to be able to use all of these various application workflows. There's no infrastructure to manage. Anybody in here ever had a Mac Mini under a desk that is running a bunch of scripts on Chrome? Yeah? Okay. So you don't have to manage that infrastructure anymore. You don't have to worry about interoperability with the operating system that you're running on. You don't have to worry about security updates. You don't have to worry about public endpoints to be able to do external triggers, for example. And you also don't have to maintain all of these scripts. I don't know if anybody's ever liberated a script from the internet and seen that there's, I don't know, a dependency of JQ to pass JSON, for example. I'm talking about JSON a lot. Just as a side note, personal preference, don't ever use JQ, awk, sed, grep for the win. Excellent. So, slightly controversial. I'll show you some stuff later, don't worry. So, yeah, you don't have to maintain scripts. Again, you don't have to maintain dependencies. You don't have to maintain the underlying operating system. You all know why cloud stuff's like in some ways better than on-prem stuff. I'm not going to say every single time, but yeah, a lot of scenarios where it is. So basically, the whole idea is this makes your life easier as an admin. So I'm going to pass over to my esteemed colleague, Andy Rana, to talk about the various components of Octa workflows. Thank you very much. Yeah, just press a button, it might work.
Just going to break down the kind of core requirements, core components of using Okta workflows. And really, you're looking at three main pieces to put it together. Looking at the events, the actions, and the functions. So with the events, things like an activity in Okta, doing something to a user account, adding to a group, so some sort of trigger to activate that workflow and make it happen. We can also use scheduled events as well, so things that happen at a specific time or the weekends, etc., and build out that kind of automation while you sleep. To add to that, we've got our actions. So this is where we've got those connector cards, we can add the cards. With Kandji, we've got things like recovering the 502 key, sending an erase command, things like that. And there's other MDM products, you can use connector cards for them as well. And then added to that is the function piece, where we can take the data, we can pull the information. So for example, if you pull all the user devices from Kandji, we can do some information handling there via text, number, etc., error handling, and make different workflows out off the back of that. Let's see what this part does. No. we tried. There we go. All right. So here's some examples of workflows that you could potentially put together with Okta and Kandji. But again, you know, it could relate to other MDMs and other IDPs. But for example, you deactivate a user in Okta, we could follow that up with a series of actions. Send the lock command to the device and then update your asset management system. We could also do something with user groups. So if we add a user to a specific group, specifically in Kandji, we could then move that device from one blueprint to another blueprint. But then we could also notify admins via Slack, via Teams, or if you want to go traditional, maybe email. We've got lab reprovisioning. This is a cool one. So imagine scheduled, especially in education, right? You've got those lab environments. We could do something on a schedule. Maybe every weekend, we want to send an erase command to all our lab devices. Devices reboot. We use the automated device enrollment, where we get the setup to automatically proceed as it goes through. The device enrolls itself, gets back into Kandji, deploys all the apps. We've got a fresh system, rebuilt, rebooted over the weekend. No one's touched anything. Other things we can do, 512 key. We could securely obtain that key. We could pass that through, send it directly to the user via Slack. All automated by actions in Okta. Password changes, and then we could set off notifications to different systems, generate tickets automatically as well. And last but not least, really kind of playing on the lab reprovisioning, but we could send scheduled commands to reboot devices on a scheduled time. Maybe once a week, we want to get all our iPads, etc. rebooted, but then also kind of log that information somewhere else. So it's a few examples of what can be done. Moving on. If I can.
Which one is it?
Ryan.
Which
I'm handing over to Ryan. So Ryan's going to take you through some examples in terms of how to actually put this all together and what that looks like.
So a lot of this so far has been theoretical, right? This has all been theoretical, it's all been vocal, that kind of thing. I just want to run through two examples and actually show you what a workflow looks like in the GUI. The first one I'm going to do is around triggering something based on an Okta event. So in this case, it's going to be blocking devices automatically if you deactivate a user in Okta. Right? But then also one of the really wider benefits of something like Okta workflows or any like automation in this sense is being able to share that information with other tools. So these guys mentioned exporting information to an asset management system or a security system, things like that. I'm going to do the other button. Oh. It was a 50-50 Okay. So this is what it actually looks like. So James mentioned no code, low code, GUI driven. We build everything out via a web interface and just picking off the shelf cards that are API actions with all of the inputs and outputs already built into them, that sort of thing. We always start at the top left. The first column there is our event. So that's the trigger. In this case, that is triggered by a user being deactivated, not we have a bunch of outputs that we're expecting from that, and we can quite literally drag and drop into other cards based on attributes from that. In this case, we're using the Okta ID. We're passing it into an API call for listing devices, and we're filtering on the term Mac. Ideally, that will pull out, using an API call, a response for every device that's associated with a particular user. These are all theoretical, right? But don't take a screenshot and build it, because there's error handling and stuff you can build into this as well. This is just an example of it. What we then do is the output of the list devices workflow I mentioned gives us the device ID, the device name, the model, the serial number, all of those things just naturally. We can drag and drop into the next card, which then informs a lock command. So it's an API action into, in this case, the Kandji MDM command to send the device log to that device, which is really cool. What you can also then do is build out custom messaging to say, in this case, we're composing if it works and if the response is great, then we can fire into a Slack channel the name of the device that was logged, device, the user that was associated with it, the PIN to unlock it, things like that. So you've got notifications. Likewise, if it fails, you can also inform the team so they can perform corrective action, or they know that something's failed. And then again, there's not a single part of code on here apart from just using variables and stuff that you would use in the GUI. Cool. The second one that I just want to give you an example of is the other way. So instead of triggering it by an event, we can schedule something like James mentioned. This is the lab example. So scheduling a lab erasure or something like that, and then feeding that information into a third-party system. So this has a couple of components, right? So this time at the top left, our scheduled flow is the event. We can determine using a customizable card inside that event to say what day of the week it needs to be on, what time zone it needs to be on, how often it triggers. If you wanted, you could make it trigger every 15 minutes, which wouldn't end particularly well, right? But the idea here is you can build out dates and times for automatic execution of this stuff. The first thing we do in the actual workflow itself is at that time we target a blueprint name. So get me a list of devices that are in this blueprint. That blueprint would be the lab, or it would be the room that the devices are in, or something like that in your MDM environment. The output is going to be the ID of each device, because we need that for the next API action. We can then grab the I did it the other way around. We want to grab the ID of the blueprint first. That then informs the target for the next API action, which then grabs the IDs of all the devices inside that blueprint. What we then do is we build effectively an object containing all the device IDs that live inside that blueprint. And what you can do with that is we can build in flow control and all of those programming code constructs that you use in day-to-day scripting. In this case, we've got a for each loop. The for each loop, for each of those device IDs that it calls back, we can run a helper flow. And that helper flow is effectively a workflow that you can reuse. You can use it in many different workflows. You're not rebuilding workflows all the time and sharing the same config across everything. Simple case of you pass the device ID in, and then again, for each iteration of that for loop, for each device, we're going to send the device ID. We're going to send the erase device API call this time, or the MDM command for that device. And again, we can compose a custom message and inject that into a Slack channel. So again, users are aware and notified of what's happening. You can get a little bit of audit control and over what happened, when it happened, that kind of thing, outside of the MDM. Cool. So again, because we're short of time and that kind of thing, and it's a quick session, we encourage you to come and find us after the event, ask us questions. We're more than happy to talk about this sort of stuff with you.
How long have we got? Are you going to blow the horn out? We've got about a minute. All right, I'm going to go quick. Stop the stream. We've got one slide that I think will probably be useful before we do the stream stop.
I need to do it right first time.
If the clicker will work, then the thing will work. Right, here we go. Yay, technology works. So we've got an event going on Tuesday at 6 PM GMT, which is called What's Next? I don't like the fact that he's got the horn. I really don't. Air horn. We have an event on Tuesday at 6 PM GMT called What's New in Kandji. This is going to give you a bit of insight into what's going on with Kandji over the next few weeks and months in more detail. I'm going to give you a little bit of a peek inside now. Please feel free to scan the QR code or remember the URL, which is now gone. Awesome. There we go. Now, right, so here's the next little bit. Thank you very much, Neil. I'm just glad I was expecting it.
Next up, we've got James Penning. Straight away, yeah, really straight into it.
So whilst that's going on, to explain the horn thing, we had some comments about client meetings, stuff where things may be overrun. So the idea was a friendly reminder of the session limit thing. So that was the idea of just trying to bring something in so that we can say, wait, time's up. So yeah, on that, here you go. Heading, no pressure.
Thank you. Okay, so go. So, hi, I'm James. I work as a systems engineer at dataJAR. I've roughly 13 years experience working with Apple devices. Today I'll be talking to you about, hopefully if the clicker works, debunking the monolithic build. So, start off with imaging is dead. Yes, we're fully aware imaging is dead. Long may it be dead. We now have a singular approach, which is the Apple way. So imaging is a thing of the past. But how do organisations and businesses use this approach, and how do they not use this approach in 2022? So, Some companies have moved away from monolithic imaging and imaging in general and moved across to the monolithic build. So why monolithic build? What is a monolithic build? So the monolithic build will happen and basically after a device has gone through the automatic device enrollment. This will be where a singular approach is deployed at a large scale. It's not microformed, it's one image with absolutely everything that's thrown in, including the kitchen sink. You can see here, the device will have all the printers, all the system settings, there'll be duplicates, it will have everything all thrown in. The downside to this approach will be that it'll have slow build times, it's complex onboarding, it's high tech debt, there's always a lack of documentation. Forever and in a day. This will be because you've had engineers come and go, they'll never have documented it, it will never be passed down from junior engineers to senior engineers. Most importantly with this, they're not remote friendly. When these devices are normally unboxed, lovely IT engineers get to smell the lovely devices, get to interact with lovely devices, go, oh, this is lovely. And then from there, we'll set them all up and then ship them out. Most businesses will have a lovely ISP with decent internet. Most home providers and remote workers don't have that. What you'll also get is duplication. So you'll have the large monolithic builds deployed to devices, and from there we'll duplicate the roles, and the CEO may want Firefox or Chrome, and that's it. That's all they have on their devices, the different builds. And most importantly, you'll have unhappy end users. They would lack participants. The monolithic build approach, the end users will have everything thrown at them. They'll have all of the applications, all of the software, and no disk space. So ourselves as sysadmins will come along and say, hey, can you upgrade to the new operating system? You know, we've previously spoken about the core new features that are coming to automate that. And the end user goes, hey, I've got no disk space, because we've deployed the monolithic approach to the devices. This works. So I'm a firm believer that the monolithic build is dead. For me, with remote working first, there's no need to have this approach in businesses and education. It should simply be a far different approach. With this in mind, what's the solution? A simplified build, a simplified approach to what we're doing. It should contain the bare minimum requirements to get a device to that. It should contain just the core applications. Click go. Key security, tenant enrollment, we spoke about Okta workflows. This approach will encourage us to be much more remote friendly, fewer dependencies, far less documentation involved in what we're doing. It'll be a case of just literally getting that device, unboxing it, rolling it, and that's it. There's far less tech there, there's far fewer bespoke systems. It is the most important thing with simplified build, encourages our end users to use these devices. With the monolithic build approach, the end users will have every single piece of software that they ever have on their devices, and they won't buy into your product, into the IT management way of structuring those devices. With the simplified approach, it will encourage them to encourage them to actually look at self-service, where applications are. Okay. So, let's just have challenges. Of course there's challenges. When we speak about doing a simplified approach to our work builds, it needs management buy-in. It's difficult, we spoke about labs, because a lab will have a monolithic build approach to what they're doing. It will have every single bit of software that lab needs. We've spoken a bit previously about replacing devices, wiping those devices. Why can't those applications that the teachers or lab technicians have sit inside self-service for the end user to go and do? If we wiped a device over the weekend, a teacher comes into the class and goes, oh look, my device is going to be completely re-imaged. I'll go and find that software. I'll add that software, rather than having slower and clunkier machines. The most important thing as well with this is that when it's delivered remotely on a simplified build, the devices themselves are simple. There's less mistakes that are going to happen. The most important thing here with a simplified build is that there's missing knowledge between engineers. If you have an engineer that's in place and then that engineer leaves, that knowledge goes with them. And the age-old adjective of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The amount of times that engineers will kind of go, oh hey, I've got this monolithic approach, it's working fine for me, I don't really need to touch it. Well, do touch it, have a look at it, make sure it's working properly for you. And then last thing, time. Just because you don't have time doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at this. As ultimately you should be slimming down your builds and taking them from a monolithic approach to very, very simple. I realise I've gone through that very, very fast.
You scared?
Huh? No, it's all good. I missed half of that, it's all good. I'll leave you with a quote that I put. And then lastly is a shameless link to my blog, which talks about this in more detail. A lot more detail in there than the quick pass through that I've done. But really, lastly, thank you. Thanks everyone. Now on to Caleb from the Mac Owns Foundation.
Hi, everybody. Is it my turn?
It is. Go for it, mate.
All right. I'll give y'all a quick heads up that there's something about the layout of that room where I do have trouble hearing y'all if more than one person is speaking, and if you're like close to the screen, apparently further back in the room and one person at a time, it comes through crystal clear. Just a heads up if I ask you to repeat anything. But hi, everyone. It's really, really awesome to be here. I'm joining you from sunny St. Louis, where the climate is often like what y'all have been experiencing. And so I understand exactly how you've been feeling lately, sweaty and gross, and I'm sorry for you. But yeah, my name is Caleb Coy. I'm the chair emeritus on the board of the Mac Admins Foundation. And we've been doing kind of the press circuit, joining meetups and conferences and whatnot, and doing a bit of a presentation. I like to kind of wing it. You can see the presentation on any number of the streams that exist, so I don't want to just rehash the same thing for you, but just kind of tell you like, what the story was like from my perspective, and then if we've got time, give a chance to answer any questions that you've got. So kind of taking it back, I got my start, like a lot of people in the community, at Apple, actually back right around just shortly after Tiger was released. I was doing some research this morning and I realized like, oh yeah, it was that long ago. But I left retail in 2014 and found myself doing in-house IT at a local ad agency here in St. Louis, and had no idea what I was doing or who to turn to for help. And as I started making some connections with a few colleagues from Apple who had started to get into this world of Mac administration, they pointed me to a number of the various tech blogs and resources that were out there of people in the community, some of whom are in that room. I can think of Ben, for example, although, why would I? And it was this idea of like, know your resources, use your resources. And for me, it was, what were they? So trying to compile a list of those that I could follow regularly, trying to keep up on Rich's blog and Tom's and Emily's and Ben's and so forth, and Armin's. And I wasn't part of the IRC channels. I didn't even really know that existed until it was around early, like springish of 2015. I had started looking at Slack internally at that ad agency because our internal communications were a mess too. I was trying so hard to wrangle everyone into some sort of uniform way of getting help from me, so I didn't have to be available at all times on 5 different mediums. And around that same time, a coworker, or a colleague, former coworker from Apple, reached out to me like, "Hey, tell me about Slack." And so we hopped on a call, and I showed them around. It was like, this is what I've been looking at as a possible communications tool for our company. But they said, a lot of the communications that's happening in the Mac admins community could potentially have a valuable home in a tool like this. There was the if I remember correctly, there was the OS 10 server and there was the Jamf Nation. And not being a part of those, I don't know what they were like at all. I don't know what the internal politics or the inter-channel politics or anything. I don't know. But I hear that there was some rough days. So the two of us said, well, maybe we can get a few of us together, and instead of just like, have you seen this blog post? Have you seen this blog post? Just like via text or email or whatnot, like we can talk through questions in real time. And we're like, well, maybe 5-10 people will join us and we'll hang out, we'll talk shop, and we'll get answers and whatnot. And so that's how the Mac Admin Slack came about. Just one day we decided to create it, and within I don't know. I feel like it was maybe about a week or two that we had crossed the 100-member mark, and then somewhere in the slide deck that I referenced, there's a slide where we crossed, I think it was 1,500 and celebrated, and then it kept going and going and going. And we stopped celebrating the 100 milestones, and we stopped celebrating the 1,000 milestones, and then we stopped even recognizing the 10,000 milestones at one point, until the point where, like, sometimes I go and I look at the membership, and I'm like, when did we get to almost 50,000? And all along, we were sitting on a free plan. And anyone who's used Slack knows that 10,000 messages in the MacAdmin Slack doesn't last long. I believe the last time someone did math, it was we would run out every 36 hours if we were truly on the free plan. We made some smart moves with the admin team early on in that we reached out to people who were much smarter than us and also happened to have really great connections, and ended up having an employee who worked at Slack give us the benefit of, like, we get a comped instance internally that we can use, and I will use mine to prop up the MacAdmin Slack so we can have the full retention, which opened up a huge world of opportunity for the community, in that we just didn't have to worry about, are things going to be lost in the scroll back? Is all of this valuable knowledge that people are shared, and all of the BS too, just going to go away in a day and a half? But there was always that nagging feeling in the back of my head, like, what happens if this goes away? What happens if Slack says, no, we're not going to do that plan anymore? We almost experienced that once when there was a changing of hands between Slack employee who was leaving, who was our sponsor, to the next person who was taking over, who apparently, when we made that ownership change internally, the leadership was like, I'm sorry, there are how many people in this Slack? So that was kind of our first clue that things might be a little bit more tenuous than we thought. And I remember conversations all the way back in 2018, because I remember being, at my desk in my haunted warehouse apartment in Syracuse, New York in 2018, and thinking, like, this is fragile. And if something happens to this Slack instance, like, the community will live on and we'll find another home. But, like, that's a painful process, especially when you start to get into the tens of thousands of people. And so it was around 2019 that we started having formal conversations initially among members of the admin team, that, like, started to branch out eventually, about what would it look like if we spun up a nonprofit to say, like, let's protect the existence of this community. And then a whole bunch of stuff happened in 2019, 2020, and so forth. And so that conversation kind of fell by the wayside. But some of the same folks who were involved in that early discussion got together back in early 2021 and said, hey, let's do this for real. And that was around the same time that Salesforce acquired Slack. And we got more inklings of, like, hey, once again, you might want to consider an alternative here. And what we didn't want to do was say, like, we're going to drag the whole community to Discord, or we're going to spin up Mattermost or something. We had options there. We could have done any of those, but right now Slack is where the community lives, and for better or worse, it's working out okay, I think. And so we wanted to try to keep it there. And so we got together, the five of us who are currently on the board, with a couple other members of the community, and with our now friend, Andy Fife, who was our advisor on forming a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization here in the United States, to allow us to say, we're going to accept charitable donations and we're going to pay for this. But the more we talked about it, like, just paying for Slack didn't feel like a really good use of time for an organization. It's just like, we're going to raise money from people to then pay someone else. That doesn't make a lot of sense. What else could we do? So we put together this entire idea of the MacAdmins Foundation being here as a resource to support and defend and prop up the community at large. So obviously our single biggest expense in that is maintaining the Slack community for now. If there's ever an inkling of a need to, or a desire among the community to move elsewhere, sure, we can consider that. But for now, we're going to pay for the Slack. But what else can we do? So we started looking at, maybe we can provide conference sponsorship opportunities to help pay those costs that, like, are more than just the cost of entry, cost of a ticket to get in. There's the travel, there's the lodging, there's childcare, all of these other things that really aren't necessarily considered. Even if someone is lucky enough to have their employer be willing to say, yes, we'll pay for the conference, there's still more to consider there that we wanted to look at, as well as, like, how can we get involved with growing the community or helping to further education for people. So we started looking at scholarships for certifications. And it was around that same time that Apple approached us about the program that they recently announced, which when they announced, we weren't quite ready for, but nothing forces your hand quite like Apple announcing you. So when Apple released that, we had to kind of, we were mostly ready. We had our, as Rich likes to say, we had our ducks in a row. But it was time to say, like, okay, we've been announced to the world, we're live now. And so our primary goal right now, we've signed an agreement with Slack. We've raised the money that we need to ensure the short-term future of the community. We're continuing to work with individual donors as well as big corporate partners to make sure that that's long-term. But we're now looking at how do we make it work with Apple to get that sponsorship opportunity off the ground, to get people into learning opportunities, to get people certified, to really help build their career. What else can we do outside of what just Apple is doing, and so forth. So that's led us into, we're opening up opportunities for people to discuss with us mentorship programs, to have people that have been around for a long time, who've been doing the work to help guide and grow that next generation. So I think a lot of us really in the community probably vibe with the same sentiment that we have here on the board, that we don't all want to do this forever. We want to help bring up a new generation of people that's going to pick that torch up and keep making the world of Apple IT an exciting space and an open and welcoming space. So really, from a high level perspective, our whole goal as a foundation is just that, to ensure that the Mac admins community globally remains open, accessible, accepting, welcoming, and free. There's no pay to play in a community of knowledge workers. So that's really where we are right now. So of course I have to include, on behalf of the board, a call to action. If you have not already, or you are interested in supporting, you can of course visit macadmins.org/donate, and you can set up a one-time or recurring donation. We also have the merch campaigns, because everyone loves some good merch. And we're looking at other opportunities over time as well. But the key thing that I want to make sure that I stress with anything that we present is that we're not the end all arbiters of the future of the community. We're just here as stewards to say, we're getting this off the ground, we're guiding us to where we're going to go next, but we need the whole community behind us, and we need people who also want to step up and help. So that's an open invitation. The Mac Admins Foundation channel in Slack, hit us up there with questions. We have forms on the macadmins.org website that you can reach out if you're interested in the mentorship program or any of the scholarship opportunities that we're trying to offer, things like that. And I think that that's really it. Like, just kind of that key message of, first of all, thank you all for being part of the community. Like, none of this exists without y'all. And look for opportunities to be involved if you're able to. Again, I think that's the key too, is making sure that it's something that you have the cycles and the ability to commit to without burning yourself out, because we don't want that either. And I think that that's it. I don't know if the hosts here want to have a Q&A session, or if we want to do that in the end. If we want to do it in Slack, I'll leave that up to you. I need to pause and drink some water. Well, thank you to London Apple admins and to Kandji London for having me here. Obviously, I'm part of the Kandji team here in the States, and so it's cool to get a chance to virtually participate in an event over there.
Cool. Thanks for talking to us. Any questions? Go. I think you've got Friday here. Oh, there we go. James.
There you go. In what sort of capacity are you looking for mentors?
That's a great question. Our answer so far has been a little bit of a cop-out, but really, like, we're trying to figure out how we can open up opportunities without necessarily saying this is what you need to do. So we don't want to necessarily define what a mentor needs to be, and we want to kind of get a sense from the community of what that will look like. But really, like so much of where I am in my career, I can really only speak for myself, comes from having people in my life as I've gone from job to job who took the time to listen to me or to explain what they were doing or just let me watch over their shoulders. I owe so much, even just to a couple of folks at the Apple retail store that I got my start in. I wouldn't be where I am now at all if it wasn't for them. And so having people that are willing to partner with someone who maybe is just coming just like I was. This is my first Mac and Min job. I'm alone in this office. Like, the people are great, but they don't understand me, and I don't know what to do, where to look, where to start. I think there's a lot of opportunity to find ways to pair people up like that to maybe share a life experience, maybe just talk through, this is what my environment looks like. I see that, this is what you're doing in your environment. Here's things that I can recommend that you can try. You're stuck setting up this instance. Maybe we can walk through it together. And maybe it's just sharing experiences and letting someone talk through the stumbling points that they're finding. So again, a little bit of a cop-out answer because we don't really know what a mentorship program should look like, but we know that we want to have it. Does that help at all?
Yes, it does. And I'm assuming you've got a sign-up list, right?
Yeah. So on macadmins.org, there is a form that you can fill out. Right now, it is really just I'm interested in participating. And in that form, I think that there's a free form text section that you can put in if you have ideas or suggestions. But also the Macadmins Foundation channel on Slack is a great place to come in and to post. If you have a thought of a way that you would want to see a mentorship program go as a mentor, or if you have thoughts as someone who would want to be mentored, this is what I would like to see out of a program. We also very, very much welcome that.
Thank you. Any questions? Cool.
I'll take one. Richard from Kandji. Most inspirational book title on that cabinet over your shoulder.
Oh my goodness. Most inspirational. Got a copy of Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. Fantastic story of his life. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I'm very proud. This is the first time in a long time that I've had a bookshelf almost completely full. I've been through a lot of moves in my life, so a lot of that comes down to culling and boxing up books.
That's all. Thank you very much, Kelly, for your time. Great to hear from you. Any other questions?
Likewise.
Obviously, you've got the Macadmins Foundation channel and Slack. But
all right.
Let's go then.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. And since I'm on the giant screen now, does that mean I leave now?
Sorry, Neil's running across the room to try and sort out the call. Thank you. See you later.
Bye, everyone. Have fun.
Good pause.
I preferred the horn. So we'll take a few minutes break and
sure.
go straight into the next one.
Up to you.
See you in a minute, yep.
Yeah, see you.
Come on, yourselves. I'll get some time.
You talk that way to the mic.
They might already be on.
I mean, it's only going to be 6 months where you finish all you've got to do is clear out all those opportunities where you think our new CEO. Build an AI. Build an
It's fine. IT will sort it. No way, it's fine. Get rid of everything. You can mix.
when you're doing it, you type in So many companies. So many. Hey everyone, last session tonight. We'll try and get through it as quick as possible so you can get back to drinking. Yeah, it's terrible. Sorry about that earlier. So a bit of the rough and ready State of the Union from us lot of London Paladins, running through some things to watch out for, some things we've picked up on that kind of stuff. There will be no screenshots, there'll be no recordings as far as recordings of the beta OSs as per usual NDA dances. Just a bit of text, I'm afraid. But, God, it's not just everyone else, it's me as well. There we go. So first of all, surprised a lot of people, system preferences is gone. Disappeared.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Been possibly written, but at least renamed and restyled as system settings. Much like you have in iOS, it's a similar sort of UI, that kind of thing. Along with that, the old system preferences payloads for disabling specific preference panes, you know, the stuff you used to use that would grey out the pane and the user can't click on it and do things you don't want them to do, that's been deprecated. Probably for a related reason, I would have thought. No news yet on whether that's going to be replaced, tweaked, whether on our own, who knows on that one. There is other ways of limiting a lot of things you don't want users to do, one of which is requiring administration rights. Maybe you can lock out features using other settings, such as disabling, I don't know, network sharing or something like that. There's maybe other ways around we need to do. But just be aware of this, make sure you're doing what you can to block things, limit things, protect your companies as needed in your organisations. And also finding feedback if that's not suitable. New rapid security response updates. As someone who works for a company that's very aggressive with Nudge, thank you very much, Eric and the team there. That's absolutely an amazing product. Cannot recommend it enough, especially if you're using one-to-one deployments. But Apple have this new system where they can push out kind of hot fixes, I guess, with the OS. So push out little on-demand security updates. Now, there's ways of disabling this with an MDM profile. To be honest, though, it's an increase in security. Apple have kind of, what's the right way to put this? They have restricted the way you can limit what updates go out to your devices anyway, historically. No more SUS servers, things like that. So it does mean that updates could come out more aggressively, more faster. There is a chance of regressions and bugs being introduced, but for a trade-off of a much higher security level, instead of waiting for, well look, 12.5 came out yesterday? Yesterday, last night. Last night for us on the UK, annoyingly. That had a load of CVEs fixed in it. Loads of vulnerabilities fixed in it. We had to wait for who knows how long from when those were discovered to now to be patched. With this model, Apple could potentially release overnight update to patch certain things. So I'd see it as a good thing, but you can disable it if that's what you want. Software update commands, power nap mode, that came out a while ago, can't remember when exactly, kind of forgot it existed. Essentially when the device is asleep, you'll occasionally wake up to do some very, very basic tasks. Very basic, the idea being you don't want to trash your battery, spin up the processor cores so it gets too hot, that kind of stuff. I want to minimise all that. Apple are now allowing the NDM commands for software update to be responded to as part of that in that power nap state. So you won't run a full software update, you won't do a software upgrade, anything like that, but at least can respond to your NDM server rather than your NDM server queuing up a ton of commands while the user's gone on holiday and left the laptop closed. Apple have released on GitHub as well their schema for their device management. It's kind of a weird thing to look at as a Mac admin who's not necessarily in the development side or the NDM side, but from what I understand from the NDM vendors, it's quite a cool thing to show, very open, very visible, quite a cool thing to check out if you're feeling nosy. This one's fun. So, if you had a new login item, a new launch agent, a new launch daemon, I think those are three.
And login items.
I said login. That's the first thing I said. So login items, launch agents, launch daemons, and login items. If your management server, software product you install, you manually sit there and artisanally craft any of those items for a user without the user doing it through the GUI, for login items at least, can't. It still applies to launch agents, launch daemons. The user gets a pop-up, much like the whole, hey, this app wants to send you notifications. Hey, this app wants to use your photo library, that kind of stuff. You get a similar pop-up that says, hey, this app's added a new launch item, a new login item, a new launch daemon. The verbiage is a bit more user-friendly, but that's effectively what it means. If you are an admin user, you can say, I don't like that, no, to any of those three. If you're a non-admin user, you can say, no, don't like that, to login items or launch agents. Hands up, whose management server uses at least one of those three?
Everybody, hands up.
Who uses a management server? I could put a lot of money on saying that almost all of them will use those things. Unless you're MDM only. I might think my words there. Cron. Do crons jobs also? Possible workaround. So bear that in mind, your users could potentially disable your management tools. They could disable your security tools. They could disable your anti-malware. They could disable your DLP solution. And yes, I'm talking about this from the nice, angry Mac admin rather than a nice, friendly user. But this could be a problem. This is something you need to be aware of. High five.
It's not just a point of installation though, is it? It's at any point they can go in and find them and turn them off.
I haven't tested that yet, I've seen other nods, so yes, I don't know if it's been picked up, but essentially users can later on go in and disable them at a later period, much like your notifications, I guess, probably similar sort of subsystem.
You get explicitly told the installation.
So they get explicitly pop up installation, and later on they can still go and find it in system settings, not preferences, and turn it off. So bear that in mind, there is a lot of people finding feedback about this. If you have an Apple Business Manager or an Apple School Manager account, you have access to Apple Seed for IT, which is the beta program including the feedback system. Please, I cannot beg you enough, if this is going to impact you, file a feedback request with Apple. Because what you don't want to do is be deploying this stuff, especially if you're maybe government, finance, anything on those lines, maybe even education where you've got some things you've got to stick to, make sure safeguarding, things like that. Make sure you're filing this feedback. If it affects you, you're not going to have a good time when the auditors come around or legal comes around, etc., etc. And again, if you're in one of those programs, go into Mac Admin Snack, obviously if you're in there, there's an Apple Seed channel, look in there, there's some instructions on how to get an invite to a channel where things can be discussed a bit more openly on beta programs, things like that. Again, if you've got Business Manager, School Manager, you've got access to these tools. Use them. Yes, okay, it's more work for you. That is unfortunately one of the things there, but please do it. Not to be too negative about it, but the positive side of things, think how much malware has using these three tools, these three options, to have persistence on those devices. Your average Joe user at home, using their nice iPad, they've now gone to use their Mac, something's installed, it's then gone in these little areas and hidden itself. That's the reason why Apple have gone ahead with this. Whether you agree with it or not, that's the understanding from the Apple security standpoint on these things. Take a bit more positively. Nice things, new gifts from our Apple overlords. So previously you could add iOS devices and tvOS and iPad OS devices to your Business Manager, School Manager, or AXM is the common preference for that, via Apple Configurator. You can add them into your ADM, your Apple Deployment Program sort of portal. So if the vendor doesn't do it, or you bought it from Argos, Amazon, Gin down the street, I don't know, you can use those systems to add those tools. Apple then brought out a way of doing it with macOS via their Apple Configurator app for iOS, I believe it's called. Yeah. So you could use that. You had to have an admin account for Apple School Manager, Business Manager, etc., etc. They're now going back the other way, and you can now use this same tool to add other iOS, tvOS. I'm not sure about tvOS. Definitely iOS and iPadOS. Yeah, why not tvOS probably as well. Let me know. Essentially the same process. You don't have to have a tethered device to kind of do this whole process. You grab your iPhone out, boom, done, off you go. Everyone's happy. Little footnote here. Some new macOS restrictions are coming. That new lovely universal control option, or feature, I should say, that a lot of people maybe had great fun with. You can turn it off if you want. That's coming with new OSs. You can disable that via profile. You can also have the option to disable the user installing profiles and certificates on macOS. So there was a thing before where users could perhaps install a VPN profile that gives them ways of bypassing your tools. They can maybe install more iOS, but they can install a provisioning profile that allows them to install sideload apps in. They can install a certificate for migrateserver.com. That might actually be a poisoned well, all that kind of stuff. You can actually turn those options off in the GUI. Again, on the face of it, brilliant option, turn them all on. No, you can't do anything with our stuff. Be careful of that, because I don't know how it would affect things like, for example, JAMS conditional access, which sticks a certificate into the user's keychain. I don't know how it would interact with that. Again, if anyone's happy to test that, let everyone know. That'd be a nice community service, I guess.
Okta device trust does that as well.
And device trust for Okta, isn't it? Okta device trust is a similar thing with certificate and keychain. So again, if you turn it off, maybe that'll affect it, maybe it won't. These are betas, we need to be testing these. And I really should practice what I preach because I haven't got around to testing yet. But everyone should practice and test as much as they can on these kind of betas. Don't worry, this is the last one with me, then you can get rid of me and have some more entertaining people. First one on there, so there is an option now that, much like iOS, iPadOS, tvOS, where they require an internet connection on activation, macOS devices can also require that now. Before macOS Ace Ventura, as I like to refer to it, you could basically unplug a Mac, run it through Setup Assistant. Okay, you get the nag saying, hey, you should be in DEP, you should be enrolled, you should be in AD, or whatever the right acronym is nowadays. And you just ignored it, and great, I've got myself a free Mac. A bit annoying, but myself a free Mac. Now you have the option where you can require an internet connection. There is a stipulation for this. The device needs to be in AVM or ASM. It needs to have gone through Setup Assistant once and been wiped. So, nearly there. I don't know if we'll ever get the full same thing we get with iOS, iPadOS, tvOS, but it's not bad. If you want to be annoying, you can get all your new devices shipped to you. You could set them up, wipe them, send to the user. Then they have to go through yourself.
Zero touch.
Zero touch
for users, not for IT admins.
There is no step 2. There is no step 2. There's a lot of step 1, but there's no step 2. Much like iOS, macOS now, by default, when you install a certificate with Ace Ventura onwards, it will not be trusted by default. The user has to go and find a certificate and manually trust it. It's making it difficult for users to accidentally install random stuff. Again, they could install a CA certificate from a malware author or a malware provider or malware service, who then could be signing all certificates under the sun and doing interception work on those devices. Key thing to point out though, as always, if you're deploying these profiles if you're deploying these certificates via a profile, via your MDM server, they're already trusted, it's fine. So similar to what we had before where on iOS where you could install the things multi-step. If you push it back by profile, because the device is enrolled in MDM, Apple knows that it's your device, you're managing, you're looking after. Therefore, when you say this certificate goes on that device, it goes, yep, sure, trust it, all good. This one's an interesting one. I think I don't know why, maybe it's related to the old Thunderstrike vulnerabilities many years ago. Which one way they got rid of it is get rid of the Thunderbolt port, but that's a different conversation. Essentially, there's now user approval for connecting Thunderbolt USB-C devices. Because you don't get enough pop-ups as it is. So once that device is approved, it's fine, we'll just connect, fine, all good. Once that device is locked, if it's connected and it's locked, it will stay connected for up to 3 days. That's only if it's locked. If it's unlocked, it's fine, it will stay connected. You don't keep disconnecting, whatever. But if the device is locked, say you've gone on holiday, you left your Mac on, locked, plugged in with your hard drive, maybe do some synchronization back and forth because you've got nothing better to do. After 3 days, I guess it would disconnect the drive, unmount the volume. Again, anyone practice testing this for me, do my job for me, let me know, it'd be awesome. How you do in that case? So similar to iOS, you can disable this via profile, or allow the restricted mode, which means it's the normal behavior. Yeah, or you can disable the allowed. You can disable that functionality and return it back to current. I love double negatives and anyway. Cool, this one's quite cool. It was great when I did a lot of work for customers with shared iPads. So one of the annoying things with shared iPads, especially if you were a horrible institute that had like a horrendously long domain name for their emails, you can now push down your email domains for your Apple IDs, your managed Apple IDs, to shared iPads. So user goes, Darren Wallace at that place. And you go, boom, boom, sign in, forgot my password, someone help me please, kind of thing. But it cuts down a lot of typing, especially when dealing with maybe younger children who might not necessarily use this, or otherwise maybe older people who maybe aren't used to that kind of thing either, maybe need a bit of help, that kind of thing. Last one for me before I go away and leave you alone with someone who's a bit more entertaining. Certainly a lot slimmer. MDM can now once manage accessibility settings during your setup system, that kind of thing. So The idea being that MDM just push down a command saying, turn these on, but it doesn't enforce it. So things like the visual impairment settings, the hearing impaired settings, the I'm terrible, so I should.
Zoom, that stuff.
Oh, the zoom, we can zoom into the screen. That kind of stuff. You can push them on, and the user can go in and turn them off if they want, that kind of stuff. So again, if you're dealing with people with accessibility challenges, nice cool feature. Long time coming, especially Apple's big push to being a more accessible product for that kind of stuff. Brilliant to use things from Apple. Again, there's a really short URL that anyone can fancy typing out. Go for it. But take a photo. You can do the copy from the picture. Right, I've rambled on enough. Someone say me. We are going to, he's not going to talk.
Where's the button?
Ben, congratulations.
Thank you. What I've just realised is when I agreed to do this, I know about one of these points. I thought we just going to bomb through it. So Darren's now set me up to fail. So thanks.
You're welcome.
So some of the nice changes that are coming through. So migration system. So currently, use migration system to move a user account or a system that's MDM enrolled to another device. It can break the MDM enrollment. Generally, it does. So the new PPC we got here is the fact that we can actually migrate a device or the settings from the device between one to the other and actually not break the thing. Which is kind of welcome. The thing here, the next one, the system policy app bundles thing. This kind of snuck in. This wasn't really announced really anywhere. There wasn't been images around it and the rest of it. What you'll find is if you tested B1, B2, B2, all the beta so far, you can use your Jamf, your Monkey, whatever, to install software. When it comes to updating it or uninstalling it, you're going to hit a problem. And this is where you've got a PPC here, which is, apparently PPC has been available all the way through the betas, but wasn't public till recently. But a new key that you can put in to say, allow this bundle to, or this binary, to actually update and, or delete the thing. So the install's okay, but it's the update and delete is the problem. But essentially, if you're using an unsigned tool to install software, so if you're using like the public version of Monkey, for example, you're going to want to sign it, you're going to want an MDM profile, an MDM server to push down a PPC to actually allow those actions going forward. There's discussions on this, and then I can discuss email lists and the rest of it, but this can be quite fun and an interesting one, but it did kind of sneak in a little bit. It was on the privacy session, but it didn't really kind of actually explain it. But that, if you look for system policy app bundles, then you'll find a footnote in some Apple PPC documentation. So hopefully your MDMs, you put pressure on them, they'll support it, and then you guys can actually fully test it as well. So AXM now federates with Google Workspace for skim provisioning. So if folks you're not using Azure, etc. Woo! Yeah. I'd be remiss, anyone listens to the podcast, to not mention about Jump Cloud wanting that as well. So if you're a Jump Cloud customer, I think Tom Bridge would very much be happy if I submit this and say, please submit feedback. But it's the same type of thing. So kind of Azure to Google, more skim provisioning using Jump Cloud and just open it up to providers basically. So this last bit here though, platform SSO. So if you're using Nomad and then moving on to things like Jamf Connect, etc., you've had a login window replacement and you're authenticating towards an IDP. What Platform SSO will give us is an Apple native way of authenticating to an IDP. So all that kind of really weird, kind of changing the login window, and this thing happened, and this thing happened, unexpected behavior, this is what it should give us. So user can sign in with an organization ID, which is their IDP ID, a login window, and what this will give us is a few things, such as replacing AD binding, because the user should get the tickets, etc. required. But the thing is as well, if you look at things like Jamf Connect, etc., you log into these applications, that application gets a token for the thing that you just logged into. This is going to be platform-wide, or sorry, OS-wide. So loads of us that have done Kerberos stuff, Who remembers TGTs from their ACTCs? There we go. A few hands went up before I finished. But do you remember you log into the OS, you get a ticket, and you could use that to authenticate to mobile services? This brings that back. Not this kind of crap of logging into a machine, and then you log into this thing and log in, and then you suddenly authenticate to Safari, and then you open this up and authenticate to this. You've got one account, single sign-on, but you sign on multiple times. This should bring on the actual old school log into a machine, get a token, use the token everywhere else.
Well, actually support TGTs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. So, but it's the actual TGTs, the ticking grinding ticket from the
KGT.
AE days, as per being skipper defining, and it's also TGTs or potential equivalent for SAML tokens. So that's kind of what we kind of.
TG SAML.
I think we just leave it. But essentially it's that experience, you log into a device, you can authenticate services, you've logged in once.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say single sign-off in 3 different ways, right? Single sign-off. Right? Basically, one is one credential across multiple services, if something prompts you, it's the same thing. One is you've got a token you can pass through, but maybe you open Safari, authenticate once, but that's it for 8 hours. And one is you authenticate to the bloody machine and get an actual token and log in. That's, the latter one is the bloody thing that I just said there, which is probably more eloquently put.
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail, yeah. And I said the bloody thing. Right. There we go, now I get to pass on to Neil.
This one blew my mind when I watched the video, so I urge you to watch the video as well and have your minds blown. Essentially, it's called Managed Device Assertion. It's for your mobile devices, your tvOS, your iPad OS, iOS. Essentially, gives the device a way to prove to a server a thing that it's trying to talk to prove it is what it says it is, so who it is. But it does it at a very kind of core level, using Apple's own technology and its own hardware to do it. So it's sort of like your Opta device trust, but maybe on steroids or leveled up, as it were. My understanding of this is, and it took me a while to try and understand it, so it's more of an interpretation, and maybe folks here have a better understanding of it, is that you have 2 components to it. One is the assertion, which is a certificate that gets generated by the hardware itself, and that certificate is signed by Apple and the secure enclave on the hardware, so it's unique to that, and that contains some of the information about the device, its identity, and some properties about it, like its serial number, its UDID, which are key things to identify to an MDM, and there's also like the version number of the secure enclave and stuff like that in there. The MDM servers can request that attestation from the device from an MDM command, device information command, and then the device returns it back. And that essentially just tells the MDM server that, yeah, I'm a device and I have some properties and here they are. It doesn't really say, doesn't prove that the device is who it says it is. So the second part of it is this ACME certificate, or the automated certificate management environment. And that's implemented through a profile payload. It's really similar to SCEP certificates. How many of you guys have done SCEP, ADCS, that kind of thing, where your devices will request a certificate from a CA, and they can use that to authenticate services. It's the same kind of thing, but you would spin up an ACME CA server now, and then the MDM would produce profile payload. So you could get the device to use its device attestation to then go and get the certificate from the ACME server. So you've got this certificate that's only issued to the device that is the device it's supposed to be. And then that certificate, your ACME certificate, is then used for authentication to the MDM itself. Wi-Fi VPN within a web browser like Safari to authenticate to things you're signing into. All the things you use a device certificate for at the moment. That's what I think it does. I urge you to watch the video because they do a much better job of explaining it than I could.
Does the certificate explode when Roadrunner runs past?
I know, yeah. Yes, I have. And here are all the links to the video, so I don't do a quick screen grab of that. We'll bung these slides up on the website as well soon after this. I'll leave that up there for a moment.
I think, like Darren said at the beginning, we're trying to be careful of the NDAs here with Apple on that because apparently you can't post images publicly and the rest of it. So we tried to avoid people all the text, but we're trying to tread that line of not being in trouble. But enjoy the links.
So everything we spoke about is in public domain. It's in the WWDC videos, or it's in Apple's documentation live on the internet for anyone to read right now. A little bit at the bottom as well I mentioned, in case you don't see it, it's quite small, is there's the Appleseed channel in the Mac Admin Slack where people do discuss the betas and things like that. And actually, you go in there and then read the pinned post. That'll tell you what to do next to get to a place where you can actually discuss with other actual proven Appleseed members all the NDA stuff. Because Apple are quite happy for folks to talk about all of that stuff amongst themselves if they're all members of the Appleseed program because they're not sharing it outside. You check that out. And finally, if you like what you're seeing with this community at these meetups, why not join in? Become one of us. If you'd like to host or speak, scan the code. We've got a couple of forms up there. Or speak to myself, Darren, or Ben, if you like. Find out more. We'd love to hear. With that, we'd like to thank our hosts, Kandji, Ryan and James, and Caleb as well, who was joining us for his presentation, and also Mr. James Penning over there for your talk. So thank you all very much for the hosts and speakers. And now I'd like to read the rating for.
It has been an absolute privilege on behalf of Kandji. There is a shed load of tab left, so please join us upstairs and finish the drinks off because otherwise they're going to waste.
That's upstairs, but other upstairs.
Other upstairs.
So that's the big bar in the lobby area, so where you all came in. There's a bar called Bloom's Yard. So if you come out of the main door, look left, go straight there.
So in case you get stuck, we have got a map.
We are standing now, just there.
Right down.
SWAT you.
Level 2.
Yeah.